23 years ago, a young woman vanished after a late-night shift on South Street, Philadelphia, leaving nothing behind but fear and uncertainty for her family. Authorities found her silver car near the Delaware River, but with no direct evidence, every lid quickly hit a dead end, turning the case into a cold file. Yet, over all those years, her mother never gave up hope, clinging to the belief that one day the truth would come to light. And then, when modern forensic technology, combined with the persistence of investigators, a seemingly minor detail overlooked since 2002 became the key to unraveling the entire case. Before diving into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you find this video compelling, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. On the night of September 14, 2002, Philadelphia's South Street was still aglow with neon lights, bars blaring loud music, laughter mingling with the clink of glasses, but as the night wore on, the crowds thinned, leaving only a few drunken stragglers and solitary figures hurrying into side alleys. In a small coffee shop at the end of the street, 23-year-old Emily Harper finished her late shift. She took off her apron, carefully hung it on the rack, and waved goodbye to her coworkers. A colleague from the same shift vividly recalled that moment around 10:30 p.m. Emily slipped on an old denim jacket, clutched her small handbag, and said she was heading straight home with no other plans. Outside, the early autumn air was chilly, with dampness from the nearby Delaware River seeping into the city, making the atmosphere even more somber. A pedestrian passing by later reported seeing a petite young woman walking toward the parking lot, her eyes downcast, steps quick, as if escaping the night's cold. In his hazy memory, her silhouette seemed to vanish within seconds, swallowed by the rows of parked cars in the darkness. At the same time, a taxi driver waiting for fares at the street corner also recalled noticing a female figure crossing the road, her long dark hair catching the glow of the dim streetlights, looking somewhat lost and hurried. The flicker of headlights on the uneven pavement briefly illuminated her small frame before she turned toward the parking lot and disappeared. Those fleeting memories later became the only fragile evidence of the last moments Emily was seen. South Street gradually fell silent in the late hours. The windows of the row houses above went dark, with only the faint music from a distant bar mixing with the sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional hum of passing cars. In a small house in Fishtown, Emily's mother, Karen, began to feel uneasy. Normally, her daughter would text if she was running late, but tonight, the phone remained ominously silent. Karen called repeatedly, each time hearing only the endless ringing, echoing into a void with no answer. Her worry quickly turned to panic as the clock ticked past midnight. She paced the living room, her eyes glued to the phone on the table. Emily's brother, Daniel, also tried calling her cell, but got only silence in return. The repeated calls, each unanswered ring, made the atmosphere in the house increasingly suffocating. By 2 a.m., Karen could wait no longer. Trembling, she picked up the phone, her voice breaking with fear as she called 911. "My daughter is missing. She's never not come home like this." That report sliced through the quiet night, marking the moment Emily Harper's fate officially entered the vortex of a mysterious disappearance. At dawn on September 15th, 2 Philadelphia Police Department patrol cars pulled up in front of the Harpers' small Fishtown home. Karen opened the door, looking exhausted, her eyes red from a sleepless night. Daniel stood behind his mother, clutching his phone as if one more call might make his sister pick up. Initially, the night shift officers noted it might just be a common late getting home case, but when Karen emphasized that Emily had never vanished without a word, they immediately contacted an on-duty detective to launch an investigation. Detective Michael Hanlon arrived around 4 a.m. carrying a steaming coffee and a worn leather notebook. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and sharp but weary eyes, a sign of someone used to sleepless nights, he stepped into the living room and quietly studied the family photos on the wall. Emily, smiling in her high school graduation uniform, Emily, with an old guitar, Emily with her mother and brother on a beach trip. Each photo now served as a harsh reminder of her absence. Hanlon sat down, pulled out his pen, and said in a low, clear voice, "Tell me everything you can, from last night until now." Karen began. On the evening of September 14th, Emily texted that she'd head straight home after her shift. When she hadn't returned by nearly 11 p.m., Karen called. The first call rang, but went unanswered. She tried again and again. By midnight, there was still no response. Daniel added that he texted her, but the messages went unanswered and weren't marked as read. Both mother and son knew Emily rarely silenced her phone and never failed to check in when out late. Cell tower data later confirmed that the last signal from Emily's phone was recorded at 10:35 p.m., just minutes after she left the coffee shop. Hanlon took meticulous notes. He asked the family to describe Emily's appearance and clothing. Karen recalled clearly a faded light blue denim jacket, dark pants, familiar white sneakers, and a small black leather-strapped handbag. Daniel added that the bag usually held her wallet, car keys, and a small notebook she carried for jotting things down. Hanlon underlined that detail in his notebook, as everyday items could become critical clues. After interviewing the family, Hanlon contacted the coffee shop on South Street. The night manager confirmed Emily ended her shift at exactly 10:30 p.m. A female coworker recalled Emily waving goodbye and hurrying out the door toward the parking lot. "She seemed a bit rushed, but I didn't see anyone following her or waiting outside," the coworker said. Hanlon marked this detail, as haste often hinted at an unusual situation. Back at the Harper home, Hanlon asked about Emily's recent relationships. The name Chris, her ex-boyfriend, came up. Karen insisted Emily had broken up with him over 6 months earlier and barely stayed in touch. Still, Hanlon noted his name for verification. In missing persons cases, old acquaintances can sometimes be leads, he mused. Hanlon asked to see Emily's room. The small space was tidy, the bed neatly made, clothes still in the closet, a desk with books and a few photos of friends. There was no sign she'd planned to leave for an extended period. On her desk, her desktop computer showed its last login at 5 p.m. the previous day. Hanlon jotted down, "No prior preparation, rules out voluntary departure." By 7 a.m., as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Detective Hanlon spread a city map across the living room table. He marked the coffee shop on South Street with a red pen, traced the route to the parking lot, and from there to the Fishtown home. The distance wasn't long, just over 3 miles, but it had enough intersections and turns for a young woman to disappear in minutes. "We'll sweep this entire route," Hanlon said decisively. He ordered checkpoints, traffic camera reviews, and interviews with late-night witnesses around South Street. The map, with its red circles, green lines, and arrows, became the command center that morning. For Karen and Daniel, it symbolized the faint hope that Emily was somewhere along that route, waiting to be found. For Detective Hanlon, it marked the start of an official investigation, a journey that could last days, months, or even years. On the morning of September 15th, just hours after Detective Hanlon mapped out Emily's route home, a patrol team was dispatched to the Delaware River waterfront, where the road from South Street passed several parking lots along the water. Morning fog shrouded the river, and the wind carried a cold, musty smell of moss and rotting wood. The first weak rays of sunlight glinted off a silver object parked crookedly by the roadside, half hidden under trees. It was a silver Toyota Corolla, the same model Emily drove daily to work. A young officer radioed in, voice tense, "We may have located the victim's vehicle." The car sat still, as if abandoned hours earlier. There were no signs of a collision or broken windows. The first odd detail was the driver's side door, slightly ajar, unlocked, but with no signs of being forced. Hanlon crouched, examining the door frame and lock, then shook his head. No forced entry, someone opened it from inside, or Emily opened it for them. He put on gloves and gently pulled the door open, revealing a cold, stifling interior. The driver's seat was still adjusted to Emily's usual position, but on it lay her phone, screen dark. The battery was dead, but the fact that the phone wasn't in her bag, but left on the seat, caught Hanlon's attention. He signaled for forensic officers to photograph it before sealing it. Meanwhile, Emily's wallet, which her family said she always carried, was gone. This was a detail too significant to ignore. If it was a robbery, why leave the phone but take the wallet? Under the driver's seat, Hanlon noticed specks of dried mud on the floor mat. The mud was dark brown, distinct from the dry, dusty dirt typically picked up on central Philadelphia sidewalks. He leaned closer. The streaks were long, as if someone had stepped into the car after walking on wet ground. "This isn't mud from South Street sidewalks," Hanlon said, frowning. "Someone might have come from the open land near the river." Forensic officers scanned the back seat and found a few long hairs caught on the headrest. A quick comparison showed they were darker than Emily's light brown hair. Hanlon immediately ordered the hairs collected for DNA testing. The presence of unfamiliar hair in the victim's car not only raised questions about a second person being inside, but opened a critical line of inquiry. Had Emily given someone a ride, or had a stranger forced their way in? The trunk was checked carefully, but it held only miscellaneous personal items: an old jacket, a magazine, and a half-empty water bottle. No blood, no signs of a violent struggle, but the very cleanliness of the scene made Hanlon wary. In missing persons cases, an undisturbed abandoned vehicle often meant the real events happened elsewhere. The area around the car was quickly sealed off. Yellow tape was stretched across the entrance to the riverside lot, keeping out curious onlookers and reporters who were starting to arrive. Forensic technicians set up a temporary tent, taking photos from multiple angles, collecting soil and mud samples from both inside and outside the car for comparison. Every detail was documented: the car's slightly crooked parking position relative to the lines, tires caked with wet moss, as if parked close to the river's edge, and a windshield covered in an unusually thick layer of dew compared to nearby vehicles. Hanlon stood for a long time staring at the silver Corolla. He knew this was the first turning point, a tangible piece of evidence, a real crime scene to begin piecing things together. A question flashed through his mind. Did Emily drive the car here and then vanish, or did someone bring it here to throw off the investigation? The answer would shape the entire direction of the case. When an officer reported that the hair samples, mud, and sealed phone had been collected, Hanlon nodded. "We have our first lead. From here, every move revolves around this car." The Toyota Corolla was hoisted onto a tow truck, covered with a sealed tarp, and taken to the forensic garage. The police officially expanded their investigation along the Delaware River, marking the start of a missing persons case that was no longer simple. It was turning into a mystery with layers of overlapping clues. That morning, the Delaware River waterfront was tightly secured, but Detective Hanlon knew the real security cameras were the people living and working nearby. He split his team into small groups, fanning out to interview everyone from the docks, to parking lots, to 24-hour convenience stores. No one could predict when a seemingly trivial detail might become the key. The first person they approached was Mr. Patel, the owner of a convenience store at a corner not far from where the Corolla was found. Patel was familiar with many regulars, but on the night of September 14th, around 11 p.m., he noticed an old blue pickup truck parked right in front of his shop. "I remember because it was parked illegally," he stressed, "blocking my view outside." According to Patel, the truck stayed there for about 15 minutes, headlights off, but engine running. He couldn't clearly see who was inside, only hearing faint music coming from the vehicle. When he returned to the register to ring up a customer, the truck was gone. Hanlon immediately noted, "Blue pickup truck, possible link." At the docks, Hanlon and a young officer met Joe Ramirez, a night shift security guard. Ramirez, a cautious former soldier, was observant. When asked, he scratched his chin and recounted shortly after 11 p.m., While patrolling near a container lot, he saw two figures standing close to the water, about 200 meters from where the Corolla was found. I heard them arguing, their voices tense, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't get a clear look at their faces, just saw one wearing a light-colored jacket, and the other taller, broader. When I got closer, they went quiet, and then a vehicle started up and drove toward the main road. Ramirez wasn't sure of the vehicle's color, but confirmed it had a strong engine sound, unlike a typical sedan. Another witness, a taxi driver named Omar, often picked up fares around South Street and the riverfront after midnight. He said around 11:15 p.m., while waiting near an old warehouse, he saw a young woman standing by the curb, wearing a blue denim jacket and dark pants. She kept looking around, like she was worried about something. I lowered my window to ask if she needed a ride, but just then a blue pickup truck drove by. She turned to look at it, then quickly walked off in another direction. I figured she was waiting for someone, so I didn't think much of it. When Hanlon showed him Emily's photo, Omar nodded immediately. Very similar. I'm almost certain it was her. 3 accounts, 3 perspectives, but they didn't fully align. Patel saw the pickup parked outside his store, but didn't see anyone inside. Ramirez saw 2 people arguing, but couldn't confirm their involvement. Omar said he saw Emily, or someone very like her, acting anxious when the pickup appeared. Yet one detail stood out clearly. All 3 mentioned a blue pickup truck in the same time frame, near the same location. Hanlon stood by the river, eyes on the silent cranes at the docks, the witness's account still echoing in his mind. The abandoned Corolla, the phone left on the seat, the missing wallet, strange mud on the floor mat, unfamiliar hair in the back seat, and now reports of a blue pickup truck seen multiple times. He knew he'd latched onto a lead strong enough to steer the entire investigation. On the spot, Hanlon ordered, "Focus on verifying all blue pickup trucks registered within a 5-mile radius. This is our next move." As the midday sun shone down on the Delaware, the yellow tape remained around the now-removed Corolla. In the police's hands were inconsistent, sometimes contradictory statements, but one image was becoming clear. The mysterious blue pickup truck. It didn't just pass through that night, it loomed as a shadow trailing Emily Harper's disappearance. 3 days after Emily Harper vanished, Philadelphia's atmosphere had turned into a tense frenzy. What began as a missing persons case confined to her family and a few officers had now gripped the entire city in an eerie silence. Detective Hanlon and his team officially expanded the search on a large scale, starting from the Delaware River waterfront and radiating out to the areas marked on the investigation map. On the morning of September 17th, the riverfront was far from its usual quiet. K-9 units were deployed along the embankment, leashes taut as dogs sniffed close to the ground, scouring every patch of grass and damp soil for traces of footprints. Intermittent barks raised the hopes of nearby officers, only to fade into silence. Each time a potential clue seemed to emerge, forensic teams collected soil samples and noted details, but the results were fruitless. On the water, firefighters used motorboats to scan the river, deploying sonar devices into the murky depths, hoping to detect any submerged objects. Occasionally, a boat paused, and a diver in black protective gear plunged in, resurfacing minutes later with a shake of the head. The ripples spreading from the dive only underscored the silence. Locals gathered along the shore, watching quietly. To them, the scene felt like a slow-motion black and white film, each boat movement and wave amplifying the growing unease. Beyond the police, dozens of volunteers joined the search. They carried maps, splitting into small groups to comb Pennypack Park, known for its dense, winding trails. Every bush and crevice was checked with flashlights. Another group ventured into the abandoned industrial area near Kensington, where empty warehouses with graffiti-covered walls and cold concrete floors were littered with broken bottles and discarded needles. Under flashlight beams, the dark corridors sent chills through even the most seasoned volunteers. But despite their efforts, no trace of Emily was found. Meanwhile, Local media covered the story relentlessly. Philadelphia's Channel 6 broadcast live from the scene, describing the tireless work of rescue teams. Newspapers ran headlines like "Where is Emily Harper?" on their front pages. Emily's image, her youthful smile, light brown hair neatly tied back, was everywhere on TV, in print, and on Missing. Emily Harper posters plastered across telephone poles, bus stops, and store windows. Passers-by paused to look at the flyers, then walked on, carrying a chill in their hearts. Hanlon walked along the river, glancing at the freshly posted flyers on a pole across the street. He knew that when a victim's face blanketed the city, it was both a hope and a burden. Hope that someone might recognize Emily somewhere, but a burden because each passing day made those posters a cruel reminder that time was working against them. Daniel Harper, Emily's brother, and his friends printed hundreds of flyers, handing them out to passers-by. He stood silently at a bus stop, staring at a poster with drained eyes. A woman took a flyer, looked at him with sympathy, and softly said, "We'll pray for your sister." Daniel only nodded, saying nothing. 3 days of relentless searching, hundreds of people involved, but the result was a vast void. No new evidence, no additional witnesses, just more circles drawn on the map, all meaningless. The city's silence now echoed louder than any sound. As dusk fell, the search teams packed up their equipment. Hanlon sat on an old wooden bench by the river, eyes fixed on the dark, unreflective water. He wrote in his notebook, "No sign of Emily, no new leads, community growing increasingly anxious." That note closed a long day and opened the cold reality that Emily Harper's disappearance was no longer just a family matter, but a mystery weighing on all of Philadelphia. After 3 fruitless days, pressure from the community and media bore down on the investigation team. Detective Hanlon knew they couldn't keep banking on finding clues by the river or in parks. The case needed a new direction, scrutinizing the circle of people who knew Emily, starting with those closest to her daily life. He called it the initial suspect pool, a step no missing persons investigation could skip. The first name mentioned was still Chris Dalton, her ex-boyfriend. They'd been together for nearly a year and a half before breaking up over work and personal differences. Chris lived in University City, over 4 miles from South Street. When police approached him, he was annoyed but cooperative. He claimed that on the night of September 14th, he was at a sports bar with friends from 9 p.m. to midnight. Hanlon verified Chris's credit card receipts matched his timeline, and multiple witnesses at the bar confirmed his presence. Cleared of suspicion, but Hanlon noted Chris's cold demeanor when mentioning Emily, not guilty, but still harboring unresolved feeling. Next were Emily's co-workers at the South Street coffee shop, the last people to see her alive. A female co-worker, Rachel, said Emily seemed hurried when she left, but didn't share why. Rachel appeared tense when asked about staff relationships, especially when mentioning a male co-worker, Paul, who occasionally teased Emily excessively. Police questioned Paul, who denied any conflict and said he went straight to his rented apartment in Chinatown after his shift that night. Building security footage confirmed Paul was there by 11 p.m., after Emily left the shop. With his alibi verified, the team had to rule him out. Emily's Fishtown neighbors weren't spared questioning. A man living across from the Harpers said he saw a strange car drive slowly down the street around 11 p.m., pausing briefly in front of their house before moving on. This initially caused a stir, but when pressed, the man admitted he couldn't see the license plate or even confirm the car's color due to the dim yellow streetlights. Lacking verifiable details, his statement was deemed unreliable. Another angle was the coffee shop's regular customers. Hanlon summoned a few mentioned by staff. A middle-aged patron, Miller, stood out. He often lingered for hours over a single coffee, repeatedly trying to chat with Emily. When questioned, Miller said he was home watching baseball on the night of September 14th. Police checked his phone and computer. Data showed he was active online during that time, posting in a sports forum at the exact hour Emily disappeared. Despite his odd behavior, technological evidence cleared him. Over those early days, the suspect list grew and shrank. Each time a lead seemed promising, it fizzled out. A jealous coworker, a creepy regular, a neighbor's vague memory, all led to dead ends. Hanlon sat in a temporary office near the river, flipping through thick pages of notes. He knew investigations often started with those closest to the victim, but as each person was cleared, the void before him grew wider. On the 5th day after Emily's disappearance, the Philadelphia Police Department held a brief press conference. The spokesperson said they were pursuing all leads, but gave no further details. The media quickly reported no direct suspects, a statement that hit the already tense community like a bucket of cold water. The Harper family watched quietly from the back row, Karen clutching a crumpled poster of her daughter. As night fell on the 5th day, Hanlon remained in his office, the desk lamp casting his shadow on the wall. On Emily's route map, red dots crisscrossed, but none led to answers. He wrote the final note of the day: no direct suspects identified, case at risk of hitting a dead end. 6 months after Emily Harper vanished, no new leads had emerged. The initial frenzy of searches, weeks of interviews, alibi checks, and reviews of every traffic camera around South Street had dwindled to stacks of paper in the records room. Detective Hanlon sat silently in his office, facing a pile of reports he'd read dozens of times. The silver Toyota Corolla, abandoned by the river, the phone left on the seat, the missing wallet, strange mud on the floor mat, hair that didn't match Emily's. All analyzed, cross-referenced, but never pointing to a name. No suspects, no incriminating evidence. The case was officially labeled a cold case. On a gray, cold morning in March 2003, Hanlon personally signed the paperwork to transfer Emily Harper's file to the Philadelphia Police Department's archives. He followed the clerk to the basement, where thousands of paper boxes sat silently on iron shelves, each numbered, each an unfinished story. Emily's box was labeled Harper Emily, missing person of homicide suspected, 09-2002. Inside, alongside investigation reports, were faded color photos of the crime scene, hair samples from the back seat, a small plastic vial of dried mud, and a USB with a copy of the phone data. All sealed, but essentially just dormant evidence. As the clerk slid the box onto the shelf, the faint clank of metal echoed in the chilly space. Hanlon stood still, feeling as if he'd just closed a door on Emily, though he never accepted defeat in his heart. Above ground, outside that basement, life in Philadelphia moved on. People mentioned Emily less, and the media stopped reporting after the initial fervor. But in the small Fishtown house, the Harper family lived in a loop of loss. Karen Harper grew frail, still brewing an extra coffee for her daughter each morning out of habit, letting it go cold on the table. Daniel grew quieter, sometimes driving by the Delaware River just to stare at the empty spot where the Corolla had been. In September 2003, a year to the day since Emily vanished, the Harper family and a few friends held a candlelight vigil outside the coffee shop where she worked. Over 30 people stood in a circle, holding white candles, their flames flickering in the wind. A friend of Emily's softly sang a song she used to love, while Karen read a short prayer, her voice trembling. Detective Hanlon was there, standing quietly in the back. Not in uniform but in a black coat. He knew the case now lived only in the memories of those who loved Emily and in the candles lit as a reminder. The file might be cold, but the questions never faded. In the years that followed, the vigil became an annual tradition. Each year, fewer people attended, but the Harpers persisted. They printed more posters, displaying Emily's photo on a small wooden board outside the coffee shop, even as fewer passers-by stopped to look. Karen once said, "If we stop lighting candles, it means we've accepted Emily will never come back. I can't let that happen." In the basement of the police department, Emily Harper's file sat on a shelf like thousands of others, gathering dust with each passing season. But outside, on the street, where candles were still lit each year, her name was still called. A reminder that the case was never truly closed. Those fragile flames kept the file alive, if only as a faint glow in the cold darkness of a cold case. Then, in 2007, when Philadelphia decided to revisit cases thought buried, a new opportunity emerged. A dedicated cold case unit was formed, bringing together seasoned detectives and young faces expected to breathe new life into dusty files. Among them was Ryan Keller, 35, recently transferred from street violence investigations, bringing patience and zeal that contrasted with the lethargy pervading the record's basement. On his first day, Keller walked into the storage room. Iron shelves stretched endlessly, holding thousands of boxes with faded labels. He randomly pulled one labeled Harper, Emily, missing persons homicide suspected, 09-2002. The label stopped him cold. A young woman's disappearance in the heart of the city, not long ago, now relegated to a cold case. Keller set the box on his new desk, determined to read every page. For days, Keller sat in the small unit office, the desk lamp illuminating his youthful but burdened face. He pored over scene reports, the silver Toyota Corolla, parked by the Delaware, door ajar, phone left on the seat, wallet gone. He studied witness statements, the convenience store owner, who saw a blue pickup truck parked nearby at 11 p.m., the dock security guard, who heard two people arguing but couldn't identify them, the taxi driver, who saw a young woman in a blue denim jacket by the curb, anxious when a pickup passed. All pointed to one detail, the blue pickup truck. Keller frowned, writing in red ink, pickup equals sign key, underexplored. He reviewed the list of pickup trucks registered within a 5-mile radius in 2002. The file had it, but most were only cursorily checked, with no thorough interviews. Many owners were cleared based on brief statements or weak alibis. Keller wondered why this lead was dropped so quickly, perhaps due to overwhelming caseloads or lack of technology, but clearly an opportunity was missed. He went to the evidence storage room, requesting the sealed box containing the hair samples and vial of mud from the car. Those items were tested in 2002 with no results. Now, Keller asked for them to be resent to the forensics lab, hoping 2007 technology would be more precise. Experts agreed, extracting DNA from the hair that didn't match Emily's. But the results disappointed Keller. The DNA was too degraded for a full profile, yielding only a vague biological profile, too weak to match against national databases. Keller didn't give up. He requested a reanalysis of the strange mud on the car's floor mat. Results showed its mineral composition didn't match South Street soil, but resembled damp soil from the industrial outskirts near Kensington. Though not specific, this was valuable. Emily might have been forced to drive, or the car was moved through that area before being abandoned by the Delaware. He drew a new map, connecting points with red lines, circling the abandoned industrial zone, but all efforts remained speculative. No new witnesses, no clear DNA profile, no pickup truck owners charged. The investigation stalled again. Colleagues sometimes smirked, saying Keller was too fixated on a dead case, but he didn't care. For Keller, Emily Harper's case was a test of himself, a chance to prove that sometimes justice only needs one person's persistence to keep breathing. By late 2007, the cold case unit's summary report barely mentioned Emily's file. It remained listed as pending, awaiting new technology or evidence. Supervisors urged Keller to shift focus to cases with better prospects. He nodded, but back in his small office, Keller kept the Harper file on his desk, never returning it to the iron shelves. On the box's cover, he taped a yellow note, handwritten, "Don't forget her." The Emily Harper case continued to lie dormant in official records, but in Detective Ryan Keller's mind, it was never truly a cold case. That's why, even as progress stalled, he kept the file in plain sight, waiting for the day a new piece would emerge. And then, 10 years later, it was the community, not the police, that reignited the spark. In 2012, exactly a decade after Emily Harper vanished, her case was nearly buried in the Philadelphia Police Department's basement archives, but online, where collective memory never fully fades, her story unexpectedly came back to life. A veteran member of the Web Sleuths forum, using the handle PhillyWatcher, posted a new thread titled simply, "Emily Harper 23, vanished 2002. Never forget." In a lengthy post, they summarized the entire case, reposting the missing Emily Harper poster and details few still recalled. The silver Toyota Corolla, abandoned by the Delaware River, the phone left on the driver's seat, the missing wallet, and crucially, witness accounts of a blue pickup truck near the scene. The post quickly drew dozens of responses. Many members who lived in Philadelphia in 2002 shared memories of the city plastered with Emily's posters, while others expressed outrage that a case with so many unanswered questions had been forgotten. Concurrently, on Reddit's Unresolved Mysteries, a community dedicated to discussing unsolved disappearances, the case sparked lively debate. One user posted a map of the route from the South Street coffee shop where Emily finished her shift to the parking lot, and then to her Fishtown home. They compared distances, calculated average travel times, and cross-referenced witness statements from around 11 p.m. If Emily left the shop at 10:30, why was someone seen standing by the curb near the old warehouse at 11:15? One user asked. Another responded with a theory: perhaps she was intercepted, or there was an unexpected encounter. The discussion thread grew into a detailed analysis, resembling a public reinvestigation. The standout detail, tying everything together, was the blue pickup truck. A user named Cold Case Mapper compiled the three witness statements: the convenience store owner, the dock security guard, and the taxi driver, all mentioning the mysterious truck in the same time frame. Another user posted photos of common blue pickup models in Philadelphia in the early 2000s, comparing engine sounds and headlight styles to argue it could be an old Ford F-150. The debate stretched across hundreds of comments, blending frustration and curiosity. 10 years, and the police did nothing with this detail, one wrote. The blue pickup is the key. Someone knows, and someone's staying silent. The posts on Web Sleuths and Reddit began to spread. Local blogs picked up the story, calling it one of Philadelphia's most overlooked cold cases. Reporters from a few online outlets contacted the Harper family for interviews. Karen Harper, now aged a decade, spoke in a brief interview. "We've never stopped thinking about Emily. If the community still remembers, it means there's still hope." The image of her holding her daughter's photo by a candle 10 years after the disappearance became a small but powerful symbol, stirring emotions in viewers. Under mounting pressure, the Philadelphia Police Department could no longer stay silent. A spokesperson stated that the cold case unit was reviewing the Harper case. Internally, Detective Ryan Keller, who since 2007 had kept Emily's file on his desk, saw the online surge with a unique sense of purpose. He read every comment, noting compelling theories. To Keller, this wasn't just public chatter, it was a chance to breathe new life into a case thought dead. Late at night in the cold case unit's office, Keller reopened the file box, placing it beside his laptop displaying Reddit threads. The screen's green glow reflected off old crime scene photos. He murmured, "They're right." The blue pickup was never fully explored. On the old yellow note from 2007, the words "Don't forget her" seemed to glow in the quiet room. The Emily Harper case hadn't advanced officially, but the online community's pressure achieved what a decade of police work hadn't. It forced everyone to remember, and in the flickering light of Reddit's screen, the blue pickup detail became the focus of an unofficial reinvestigation for the first time in a decade. 4 years after the fervent discussions on Web Sleuths and Reddit, the Emily Harper case still hadn't seen a breakthrough. But in 2016, with new advancements in DNA analysis, Detective Ryan Keller knew it was time to try again. He brought Emily's file to the forensics lab, placing it on the table with clear resolve. "We're giving her another chance." Under strict supervision, the old evidence seals were opened. Forensic technicians laid out a plastic bag containing a few long hairs found on the back seat of the Toyota Corolla, along with a small sealed packet of the car's floor mat, still bearing traces of mud and faint biological evidence. These samples were tested in 2002 and again in 2007, but the technology then was too limited, degraded DNA sequences too short for a full profile. This time, they used next-generation analysis capable of extracting and amplifying data from just a few cells. The process took weeks. Each hair was cleaned, each cell extracted under a microscope. Scientists meticulously amplified gene sequences, running hundreds of cycles to filter out noise. Keller visited the lab almost daily, eyes tracking every progress report. He recalled nights spent rereading the file, underlining blue pickup in his notebook, and now he waited for a technological breakthrough. Finally, results came in. On the computer screen, the DNA data was clear. The biological sample from the car contained traces of a male. More importantly, the data was strong enough to compare with CODIS, the federal criminal database. Technicians entered the sample, and Keller held his breath. But the screen displayed a cold message: no match found. No hits in CODIS, meaning this man had never been arrested or provided DNA to any U.S. agency. Disappointment flickered, but Keller quickly saw the bigger picture. For the first time in 14 years, they had a male DNA profile strong enough to serve as a profile seed for new methods, specifically forensic genealogy. He knew that since the Golden State Killer's capture using genetic genealogy, private labs had expanded their research. While not immediately applicable within the Philadelphia Police Department, a clear profile meant the Emily Harper case had entered a new phase. Meanwhile, Keller requested reanalysis of the strange mud on the car's floor mat using modern spectroscopy. Results showed its mineral composition matched soil from the abandoned industrial area near Kensington, not the Delaware River as initially assumed. This finding didn't identify a suspect but confirmed the Corolla had been in that area before being abandoned. Keller marked the industrial zone on the map, a red circle overlapping older ones. The 2016 forensic report was nearly 50 pages long. Its key finding: male unknown, not in CODIS. Keller held the report, feeling like he was grasping a key that didn't yet fit, but was certain to match a lock ahead. He brought it back to his office, placing it beside the faded file box, and taped a new note. DNA profile obtained 2016, hold for genealogy. That night, alone in the cold case unit's office, Keller opened his laptop, searching for forensic genealogy labs. A slew of names appeared, from small companies to renowned labs working with the FBI. He knew he'd reached a turning point. The Emily Harper case had moved from total darkness to a faint but persistent light. An unknown male DNA profile, nameless but strong enough to trace through genealogy for the first time. In his investigation log, Keller wrote, "After 14 years, we finally have a real seed. This could be the path to bring Emily back from the darkness." Though the file still noted, "no suspect," he knew the stalemate was over. The Emily Harper case now had a defined lead, a tiny piece of DNA, but enough to rekindle hope for a city that had once forgotten. With the 2016 unknown male DNA profile in hand, Detective Ryan Keller knew he needed to broaden the investigation beyond Emily Harper's disappearance. Experience told him criminals rarely strike once. If a man had forced Emily into her car, taken her from South Street, and vanished into the night, he likely tried similar acts with other women. This thought led Keller to the old case archives, where thousands of dusty reports awaited someone to remember them. He began reviewing assaults on women from 1998 to 2004, 4 years before and 2 after Emily's disappearance. Stacks of files covered his desk. Keller patiently read each page, underlining any mention of a suspect's vehicle. Within a week, he found 3 cases with a striking common thread: a blue pickup truck. The first case was in 1999, in Camden, New Jersey. A college student reported a man in a blue pickup approaching her as she walked to her dorm at midnight. He tried to lure her into the vehicle, but she escaped. Her statement wasn't enough to identify him, and the case was dismissed as routine harassment. The second case, in 2001 in Philadelphia, involved a 27-year-old woman who said a blue pickup blocked her in a supermarket parking lot late at night. The driver asked for directions, then edged closer, forcing her to abandon her cart and run back into the store for help. Witnesses confirmed a similar vehicle leaving, but no one recorded the license plate. The third case was particularly notable. In August 2003, less than a year after Emily's disappearance, a middle-aged woman in Bucks County reported a blue pickup tailing her for miles, even trying to force her car off the road. She escaped by swerving into a gas station. The report labeled it suspicious stalking, but reading it now, Keller saw a familiar pattern, a predator using a pickup as a tool to approach and intimidate. 3 scattered cases, none involving a disappearance, but all echoing the key detail from Emily Harper's file, a blue pickup truck near the scene on September 14, 2002. To Keller, this was no longer a coincidence. He compiled the reports, pinning photocopies to a whiteboard, connecting them with red string from Emily Harper to the 3 other cases, forming a web. Keller then requested a list from the vehicle registry of blue pickup truck owners in the Philadelphia and Camden areas from 2000 to 2004. The result was staggering: over 12,000 vehicles. Interviewing all was impossible. He narrowed it down by excluding commercial trucks, government vehicles, and those owned by women or the elderly. After multiple filters, the list shrank to about 12 men aged 25-45 living or working within the relevant radius. The list was printed, each name with an old address, occupation, and current status. Some had moved away, others remained nearby. Keller underlined notable names: a mechanic with a harassment fine, a delivery driver arrested for DUI, a warehouse worker with a domestic violence record. But deeper checks showed most had alibis or evidence that didn't align with Emily's disappearance. In an internal meeting, as Keller presented his findings, a colleague sighed, 12 names and none stand out. We're back to zero. But for Keller, the list meant the investigation had shifted from aimless to specific, even if faint. He wrote in his report, list of 12 potential suspects, none prominent yet, need stronger evidence to narrow. As night fell, Keller stayed alone in his office, eyes on the whiteboard covered with files. 3 separate assaults, 1 unsolved disappearance, and 12 names without answers. The Emily Harper case remained in the dark, but for the first time in years, he'd drawn a viable map. And though no one stood out, he believed one of those 12 knew the truth. In 2019, after years of the Emily Harper case stagnating, Detective Ryan Keller took a bold step, sending the DNA sample from Emily's silver Corolla to a private lab specializing in forensic genealogy. This was what he'd noted in 2016 as hold for genealogy, now a reality, as genetic genealogy cracked cases across the U.S. The Philadelphia Police Department initially hesitated due to high costs and legal concerns, but Keller persistently advocated, citing recent high-profile successes. Finally, a cooperation agreement was signed, and the unknown male DNA from Emily's car was sent off. Months of waiting followed, and then one June morning, Keller got a call from the lab. The initial report came back with a bold line: partial match detected, distant relative found. The DNA from the scene partially matched a profile in an open-source genetic database, submitted voluntarily by people seeking lost relatives. The match was a middle-aged woman in New Jersey, unrelated to the case, but sharing about 2% DNA with the suspect, indicating a distant cousin, perhaps third or fourth. Keller, and a genealogy expert, built a family tree from this woman, branching out across hundreds of names. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, but they eliminated branches that had migrated far from Philadelphia, women, and those deceased before 2002. After weeks, the list narrowed to 3 men aged 25-40 who lived near Philadelphia at the time of Emily's disappearance. 3 names were circled in red on the board: a former truck driver, a roofer, and one that caught Keller's eye: Mark Feldman, a mechanic. Records showed Feldman worked at a garage just blocks from Emily's South Street coffee shop. He left Philadelphia in 2003, moving to Pittsburgh. Another red flag: Feldman was arrested in 1998 for harassing a woman in a parking lot, though the charge was reduced to a misdemeanor. Keller stared at the whiteboard, where Feldman's name stood out under the desk lamp. The 12 suspects from 2016 had frustrated him, but now, thanks to genealogy, only 3 remained, and Feldman's pieces fit chillingly: a mechanic familiar with driving and repairing vehicles, a workplace near Emily's coffee shop, and a history of harassing women. He stayed late in his office, reviewing old files, cross-referencing timelines. On September 14, 2002, Feldman had no recorded alibi. The garage where he worked closed at 9 p.m., and no one could confirm his whereabouts after. A perfect window to disappear, Keller muttered. The report to his superiors noted DNA genealogy narrowed suspects to 3, with Mark Feldman standing out due to geographic proximity, occupation, and prior record. Recommend close surveillance. Though not yet enough for an arrest, the Emily Harper case had taken a clear new path after 17 years. That night, Keller taped a new note to the old file box. 2019. Feldman. 3 short words, but to him, a signal the noose was tightening. The Emily Harper case was no longer just a dusty cold case in the basement. It was beginning to reveal the face behind the darkness. Mark Feldman's file lay open on Detective Ryan Keller's desk on a rainy October morning in 2019. A black and white photo from Feldman's 1998 arrest stood out: a gaunt, angular face, eyes avoiding the camera, captioned below, "Disorderly conduct, sexual harassment, Camden, New Jersey." The incident wasn't severe enough for prosecution, just a fine, but to Keller it was the first sign Feldman was no stranger to harassing women. Keller reviewed Feldman's life and work in the early 2000s. Tax and insurance records confirmed he worked as a mechanic at a small garage on Lombard Street, just blocks from Emily's coffee shop. The garage often serviced old cars from South Street residents, and a vague note in the file indicated Emily had brought her Corolla there for routine checks. This meant Feldman not only knew of Emily, but likely interacted with her at least a few times before her disappearance. More suspiciously, Feldman left Philadelphia abruptly in early 2003, just months after Emily's Corolla was found abandoned by the Delaware River. Migration records noted, "Sudden move, no contact information left with former employer." An unusual departure, especially since Feldman had no prior history of frequent moves. Keller contacted former co-workers from the garage. An older mechanic recalled Feldman often seemed irritated when female customers brought in cars. Once he kept staring at a young woman with her mom, he said. His look wasn't normal. Another co-worker said Feldman often left early, citing personal business, and would vanish for hours in the evenings. These accounts weren't enough to convict, but they painted a troubling picture. Keller also noted a detail from vehicle records. Feldman once owned a 1995 Ford F-150, blue. It matched the model witnesses described near the scene the night Emily vanished. The old license plate was no longer active, but the 2002 registration fit perfectly. Blue pickup. Keller wrote again in his notebook, this time with Feldman's name capitalized, double underlined. In an internal report, Keller wrote, Feldman meets multiple criteria: contact with victim, matching vehicle, prior harassment, left city post-incident. Further investigation needed. He knew it wasn't enough for an arrest, but the pieces were forming a thread. In late November, Keller opted for a deeper sweep. He requested the lab compare the unknown male DNA from Emily's car with any traces linked to Feldman. But first, he needed Feldman's DNA. The challenge was that Feldman now lived in Pittsburgh, working freelance at a small auto shop, unaware he was under scrutiny. Keller knew the next step couldn't be rushed. A direct interrogation might alert Feldman and destroy any remaining evidence. So, he proposed covert surveillance to his superiors. We need to monitor his routines, lifestyle, and collect DNA indirectly. Only with a match do we have the legal grounds to act, Keller argued in a meeting. After deliberation, the command approved. A surveillance plan for Feldman was greenlit, with a small team tasked to track him in Pittsburgh. Keller led the group, carrying the thick file of details from 2002 to the present. That night, back in his office, Keller looked at the weathered Emily Harper case box, next to the old notes reading, "Don't forget her," and 2019. Feldman, he added a new one. Surveillance authorized. The desk lamp illuminated the words, "A silent vow." After 17 years, Keller finally had a standout suspect to follow. This time, he swore the case wouldn't slip back into the dark. In January 2020, the surveillance of Mark Feldman began. From Philadelphia, Detective Ryan Keller and two colleagues drove to Pittsburgh, where Feldman worked at a small auto shop in an old industrial area. The foggy city, with its pothole-ridden streets, felt heavy, but Keller's focus was singular: obtain Feldman's DNA to compare with the sample from Emily's silver Corolla nearly 2 decades earlier. The first days involved observing Feldman's routine. He lived alone in a rundown second-floor apartment in a weathered red brick building. He opened the shop at 8 a.m., worked until 6 p.m., sometimes staying late for regular clients. Evenings, he visited a nearby bar, drank a few beers, and returned home quietly. No wife, no kids, no close friends. His reclusive life deepened Keller's suspicions. The strategy for indirect DNA collection was carefully planned. They couldn't get a search warrant on suspicion alone, but the law allowed collecting samples from discarded items in public. The team waited patiently. The opportunity came one Friday evening when Feldman left his usual bar. He finished 3 beers at a table by the window. Keller and a colleague sat a few tables away, posing as patrons. When Feldman left, he abandoned a beer can on the table, oblivious. As soon as he exited, an undercover officer approached, bagging the can in a prepared evidence sleeve. The operation was smooth, practiced. That plastic bag now held not just aluminum, but potentially the key to Emily Harper's case. The sample was sent to the partner lab that night. Keller barely slept for 3 days, awaiting results. Every phone ring made his heart race. On Wednesday morning, the forensic technician's voice came through. "We have results. The DNA from the beer can matches the male DNA found in Emily Harper's car in 2002. Match probability, 100%. In that moment, Keller sat motionless in his office, eyes closed. Years of waiting, clinging to a seemingly hopeless case, had yielded undeniable proof. Feldman was no longer just a name on a suspect list, he was suspect number 1. Keller immediately drafted a detailed report for his superiors, listing every piece of evidence: the matching vehicle, geographic ties, prior harassment record, abrupt departure from Philadelphia in 2003, and now scientific proof, a perfect DNA match. The report ended with bold text: "Recommend immediate preparation for arrest warrant." Still, Keller remained cautious. He knew DNA was a game-changer, but to take the case to court, they needed more proof of a direct link between Feldman and the night Emily vanished. Instead of an immediate arrest, the surveillance team continued tracking Feldman, documenting every move, every habit. They followed him to the store, the garage, the bar, and quietly checked his street trash, collecting cigarette butts and tissues. All tested, all matched the DNA. Keller pinned Feldman's photo to the cold case unit's whiteboard, circled in red, with a single line below: confirmed match. For 17 years, he'd had only circles of suspicion, red strings connecting witnesses to scenes. Now, for the first time, a name stood at the center, blazing under the desk lamp: Mark Feldman. With the DNA results confirming Mark Feldman as the man whose traces were in Emily Harper's silver Corolla, Detective Ryan Keller wasted no time. The scientific evidence was strong enough to make Feldman the primary suspect, but for an arrest warrant, he needed more pieces: motive, opportunity, and behavior before and after the disappearance. This meant diving back into the past, chasing details overlooked for over 17 years. Keller started with the Lombard Street garage, where Feldman worked as a mechanic in 2002. The garage had new owners, but they kept old employee records in storage. Among yellowed papers, Keller found Feldman's shift schedule. On the night of September 14, 2002, the night Emily vanished, Feldman was logged as leaving at 9 p.m., an hour earlier than usual. No reason was noted for the early departure, and no one knew where he went after. The time gap from 9 p.m. to midnight perfectly aligned with Emily's departure from the coffee shop and her disappearance. Keller circled the note in red, feeling the words scream a truth ignored for 17 years. He re-interviewed Feldman's former coworkers. A retired mechanic recalled Feldman's unusual interest in female customers. Once Harper came to the garage. I remember because her Corolla had electrical issues. Feldman just stood there, staring, not helping. I had to tell him to grab tools, he said. Another witness, a former cashier, confirmed seeing Feldman ask Emily questions unrelated to her car, like what time do you get off, or where do you live? Questions Emily brushed off before leaving quickly. Back then, no one thought much of it, but now, pieced together, they were warning signs. Keller meticulously documented each account, adding to the file. Feldman's image shifted from an anonymous mechanic to a patient predator who'd eyed Emily before her disappearance. That silent obsession paired with the DNA and timeline gap formed a chain of evidence too strong to ignore. He also revisited Feldman's old Philadelphia apartment, where he lived until early 2003. The landlord recalled Feldman leaving abruptly, without notice, abandoning minor belongings. He mailed the keys back, never met in person. We thought it was odd, but let it go. Keller collected the lease records, noting Feldman's departure came months after the police labeled Emily's case a cold file. In internal meetings, Keller presented his findings. On the meeting room whiteboard, he pinned Feldman's photo at the center, red strings connecting to 1998 harassment record. Garage, near coffee shop, staring at victim, left shift early September 14, 2002, moved 2003, and finally, DNA match 2019. The room fell silent as Keller concluded. We're not just relying on DNA anymore, we have behavioral history, witnesses, and a timeline. Everything points one way. No one objected. The cold case unit chief nodded, ordering Keller to prepare a file for an arrest warrant for Mark Feldman. After nearly 2 decades, the net was closing. In June 2021, Pittsburgh's sky was overcast, heavy with storm clouds, as if the city braced for a tempest. In a secure police briefing room, Detective Ryan Keller stood before a team from Philadelphia, his voice firm. Today, after nearly 20 years, we're bringing Mark Feldman out of the shadows. The arrest warrant was signed at dawn, along with a search warrant for his apartment and auto shop. Everything was ready. At 6 a.m., police vehicles, sirens off, quietly surrounded Feldman's rundown red brick building. The front door was on the second floor, up a narrow staircase. The SWAT team knocked hard, shouting, "Police, open the door." No response. 3 seconds later, they used a breaching tool. The door flew open, flashlights piercing the cramped room, reeking of motor oil and stale cigarettes. Mark Feldman jolted awake, barely reacting before being pinned to the floor, hands cuffed behind him. His eyes, first confused, turned to panic as he saw police badges and Keller in the doorway. "Mark Feldman, you're under arrest for suspicion of involvement in the disappearance and murder of Emily Harper in 2002, Keller read, his voice restrained but betraying years of pent-up tension. Feldman said nothing, biting his lip, eyes darting as if seeking an escape, but every path was blocked. As Feldman was taken away, the search team scoured the apartment. In a desk drawer, they found scattered notes, car parts lists, old phone numbers, but what froze everyone was a dusty tin box containing folded paper maps. Unfolded, they revealed a detailed map of the Delaware River area, marked with red circles around the spot where Emily's Corolla was found. On the map's edge, scrawled in pencil, South Street Girl. Keller held the map, heart pounding. This wasn't just a theory, DNA, or witness memory, it was Feldman's own handwritten admission, a private obsession kept for years. The team stood silent for seconds, speechless. A forensic officer sealed the map, photographed the scene, and placed it in an evidence bag. The search continued at Feldman's auto shop. In an old metal cabinet, they found a box of miscellany, bolts, oil-stained gloves, and a tattered notebook. Most pages logged car repairs, but interspersed were cryptic entries. 10:30 p.m., pickup, and again South Street. Though not a full confession, each word tightened Feldman's link to that fateful night in 2002. As the van carrying Feldman left the rundown neighborhood, curious residents gathered, watching. Some were shocked to learn the quiet man who'd lived among them for nearly 2 decades was tied to a notorious Philadelphia case. The media caught wind quickly. Headlines blared. Suspect in Emily Harper disappearance, arrested in Pittsburgh after 19 years, spreading across TV screens and online news. In the Pittsburgh Police Department's interrogation room, Feldman sat hunched, hands marked by cuffs. Keller faced him, spreading the file on the table. DNA doesn't lie, Mark. The sample from Emily's car matches you 100%. And now we have this map. Keller placed a photo of the map with South Street Girl in front of him. Feldman glanced briefly, then looked away, shoulders shrinking. He didn't confess, but his silence and trembling were answer enough. Keller left the interrogation room, face heavy but eyes resolute. For nearly 2 decades, he'd kept Emily Harper's file on his desk, starting with just hairs and vague statements. Now, with Feldman cuffed and new physical evidence, he knew they stood at justice's threshold. In the days following his arrest, Mark Feldman remained silent, his face ashen, eyes evasive. But under relentless pressure from the investigation team, especially with the Delaware map and notebook presented, he began to waver. In a 6-hour interrogation, Feldman faltered, muttering disjointed phrases, "Not there anymore. I took her farther north, near Bucks County." The cryptic words froze the room. Keller immediately had them recorded and left to report to his superiors. The next day, a convoy of police, forensics, and excavation equipment headed to Nakamixon State Park, a vast forested area with a lake in Bucks County, an hour from Philadelphia. Its remote trails were perfect for hiding something horrific. The map from Feldman's apartment, closely examined, had a small circle marked in the park's eastern forest. Police sealed the entrance, set up field tents, and draped green tarps around the suspected site. The first shovels broke into damp, moldy soil, clumps reeking of old mud. Forensic experts dug and scanned for metal, meticulously noting each layer. After nearly 2 hours, a technician paused. A faded cloth emerged, followed by small bones buried under thick earth. The air went still, only the camera's clicks breaking the silence. As the remains were carefully laid on a stretcher, Keller stood silent, taking a deep breath. Though prepared, seeing proof that Emily Harper had been here for nearly 2 decades twisted his heart. Each bone unearthed told a story long buried, now brought back to light. The excavation lasted until dusk. Forensics recovered nearly a full human skeleton, along with personal items, a thin silver bracelet, a denim scrap from a jacket. All were sealed, labeled, and sent to Philadelphia's coroner's office. In the following weeks, the lab conducted comparisons. Emily Harper's 2001 dental records matched the teeth found, with identical incisor shapes and an old filling on the left molar. Finally, DNA from the femur, cross-checked with Karen Harper's, confirmed absolutely these were Emily Harper's remains, the girl who vanished on September 14, 2002. The news was announced at a packed press conference. Keller stood beside the police spokesperson, eyes briefly red as he glanced at Emily's old photos displayed behind the podium. "We can confirm Emily has been found and returned to her family," his voice rang out, low but firm. Below, Karen Harper clutched her daughter's framed photo, tears streaming, yet with a rare peace. The nearly 20-year search had ended. The public erupted, local and national papers ran headlines. Emily Harper's remains found after 19 years, suspect arrested. On social media, Forums that had tirelessly discussed the case overflowed with prayers and shares. The missing Emily Harper posters, once blanketing the city, were replaced with memorial images captioned, "Found, Never Forgotten." Once the DNA analysis confirmed the remains from Nakamixon were Emily Harper's, the case file was transferred to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. The atmosphere in the DA's building gained a new layer of tension. This was no longer a hopeless cold case, but a major criminal case with solid physical evidence, witnesses, and an arrested suspect. Chief Prosecutor Lorraine Chambers convened a special team of seasoned investigators, young attorneys, and forensic experts to reconstruct the nearly 20-year timeline. On the meeting room walls, whiteboards were covered with crime scene photos, route maps, Delaware and Bucks County maps, and dozens of notes detailing times, statements, and test results. Chambers tapped her pen on the table. "We need to turn 20 years of scattered clues into a seamless, undeniable narrative for the jury." The timeline began on September 14, 2002. Emily's last shift at the coffee shop, her co-worker's last sighting, witnesses spotting her near the parking lot, and the silver Corolla found the next morning with her phone inside. Every detail, from the strange hair in the back seat to the mud on the floor mat, was pieced together to point to Feldman. The prosecution team also reviewed old files, cross-referencing similar cases from 1998, 2004. 3 women had reported being approached by a man in a blue pickup under suspicious circumstances. 2 escaped, 1 was assaulted but survived. Though not enough to charge Feldman in those cases, they provided context, showing a pattern of predatory behavior. Meanwhile, forensic experts prepared to clarify how evidence was collected, preserved, and reanalyzed over time, a critical point, as defense attorneys would likely attack the outdated evidence. Every step, from collecting DNA from Feldman's beer can in Pittsburgh to matching it with the 2002 Corolla sample, was documented with lab reports and independent expert statements. Prosecutor Chambers also ordered a review of Feldman's financial, phone, and old employment records. Results showed he ended his shift early at the South Street garage on the night Emily vanished, giving him ample time to follow her. Paired with the Delaware map and South Street girl note found in his home, these formed a clear picture of the crime. For weeks, the prosecution rehearsed arguments, anticipating defense counterpoints. They prepared witnesses, Emily's friends, co-workers, those who saw the blue pickup, and genealogy experts to explain how DNA from a distant relative led to Feldman. Every piece was arranged like a precise machine, ready to operate in court. By late September 2021, the DA's office filed the indictment. Mark Feldman was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and unlawful acts related to concealing a body. Pennsylvania media blared, "Emily Harper trial to proceed. Justice awaits," after nearly 20 years. Major New York and Washington outlets covered it too, as the case was not just a crime story, but a testament to modern forensic investigation and online community pressure reviving cold cases. Keller, who dedicated much of his career to Emily's file, sat at the back of the meeting room when the indictment was announced. He looked at Emily's photo on the board, nodding slightly. From this moment, the case left the investigators' hands and entered the public arena of justice, where truth would face its test. The trial was set for early 2022, and Philadelphia waited in tense, hopeful silence. The first day of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Mark Feldman filled the Philadelphia County Courthouse to capacity. The gallery was packed with reporters, legal observers, and residents who'd followed Emily's case from the start. The Harper family sat in the front row, eyes red but resolute, as prosecutor Lorraine Chambers rose, opening with a firm voice, "After nearly 2 decades, we finally have the chance to bring the truth to light." Chambers began by reconstructing the timeline from September 14, 2002, when Emily left the South Street coffee shop, to the moment her silver Corolla was found by the Delaware. Evidence flashed on a screen: crime scene photos, route maps. The Delaware map from Feldman's home marked South Street girl. The room hushed as images of the Nakamixon remains appeared, proof Emily had been buried there for nearly 20 years. The prosecution's peak was the DNA evidence. A forensic expert testified, detailing how the strange hair from Emily's car, preserved since 2002, was reanalyzed in 2016 with new technology. He explained creating a forensic profile seed and how genealogy led to Feldman's distant New Jersey relative, narrowing to Feldman as the sole match. The courtroom was silent, save for reporters typing. Next, the prosecution presented the decisive evidence, the DNA match between Feldman's Pittsburgh beer can and the 2002 Corolla sample. Match probability, 100%. Chambers emphasized each word, science doesn't lie. Mark Feldman's DNA was in Emily Harper's car the night she disappeared. The defense, led by Feldman's attorney Richard Halpern, countered sharply. Standing, he addressed the jury. You've heard the prosecution talk about genealogy, a controversial tool, an unstandardized method. Can we let a person's fate be decided by genetic data from distant, unrelated relatives? Is that fair? Halpern challenged the legality of genealogical DNA, citing precedents where courts remained wary of public platforms like GED Match. He suggested police collaboration with private labs might violate privacy, warning that such methods could make any citizen a surveillance target unknowingly. Halpern didn't stop there, attempting to cast doubt on the evidence integrity. He pressed the forensic expert. Those hair samples were stored for 19 years in a cold locker. Can you guarantee there was no possibility of cross-contamination? He zeroed in on the fact that the Corolla sat outdoors for a night before police seized it. Who can assure us that DNA wasn't left by someone who touched the car during that time? The prosecution countered by calling two additional witnesses, a geneticist and an evidence management expert, to confirm that storage, sealing, and analysis met national standards, with no signs of contamination. Still, the defense's pushback sowed seeds of doubt, at least in some observers' minds. Public opinion outside the courtroom was deeply divided. Many believed the evidence was overwhelming, matching DNA, the map with its note, Feldman's vague Bucks County admission, all forming a tight noose. But others warned that relying on genealogy to convict set a dangerous precedent. On TV, legal experts clashed. This is a triumph of technology, one said. This is a slide away from citizen privacy, another retorted. In the courtroom, Feldman sat stone-faced, occasionally clenching his fists when South Street Girl was mentioned. The Harper family watched every word, Emily's mother's eyes wet but fixed on the man she believed destroyed her daughter. As the day's proceedings ended, both prosecution and defense had played their strongest cards. DNA and genealogy faced off against arguments over legality and evidence tampering risks. Philadelphia followed every detail, tension spilling into coffee shops, living rooms, and the online forums that had revived the case. The question hung in the air: would justice for Emily Harper be absolute, or would legal gaps offer Feldman an escape? The trial was far from over, and public opinion burned hot, split sharply in two. Amid the trial's heated DNA and genealogy debates, prosecutor Lorraine Chambers played a new card she'd kept hidden: testimony from a key witness. A man entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, escorted by two marshals. He was Raymond Ortiz, Feldman's former cellmate from the early 2000s during Feldman's brief detention for harassment. Ortiz sat at the witness stand, adjusting the microphone, his voice gravelly but firm. In the cell, Feldman bragged multiple times. He said, "I grabbed a girl off South Street. I know how to make sure the cops never find her." I thought he was making it up to sound tough. But later, seeing Emily Harper's case on TV, I realized he was telling the truth. The courtroom buzzed, then fell silent as the judge banged the gavel. Chambers pressed. "Do you recall exactly what Feldman said?" Ortiz nodded. "He kept saying she looked like a schoolgirl, that he buried her where no one would think to look. I didn't know her name, but now it all fits." Defense attorney Halpern objected, arguing a former inmate's testimony might be unreliable. But the prosecution was prepared. Ortiz had been transferred out in 2003, receiving no plea deals for testifying. He contacted police only after reading about Feldman's 2021 arrest, driven by guilt. His sincerity made the jury listen closely. Chambers didn't stop there, calling another witness from 2002. She introduced. This witness gave a statement then deemed vague. Now, with new technology and context, we need to hear it again. A middle-aged man, in a worn shirt, took the stand. Stephen Mallory, a night shift dock guard near where Emily's Corolla was found, testified. Mallory recounted the evening of September 14, 2002, seeing a blue pickup parked oddly near the lot. Around 11 p.m., I saw two figures by the silver Corolla. There was arguing, but I was too far to hear clearly. I remember the pickup's color because the streetlight hit it. An older truck, chipped paint on the bed. He admitted initial uncertainty, but shown photos of Feldman's 2002 pickup, confirmed, that's it. The courtroom reeled. This was the missing link tying Feldman directly to the scene that night. Mallory's testimony, combined with DNA, the Delaware map, and Feldman's indirect confession to Ortiz, formed a nearly unbreakable legal net. Halpern tried to counter, questioning the reliability of a 20-year-old memory. But the prosecution presented supporting evidence. Feldman's 2002 vehicle records confirmed he owned a blue pickup, sold in 2003 before leaving Philadelphia. Garage maintenance logs matched the plate, Mallory vaguely recalled. Scattered details now meshed like perfect gears. In her interim closing, Chambers faced the jury, voice steely. You've heard DNA speak, seen the map-marked South Street girl, and now a witness placing Feldman at the scene. He bragged in jail about grabbing a girl. Everything points to one man, Mark Feldman. Tension in the courtroom peaked. Outside, media reported feverishly. Public debate raged. Some believed the case was airtight, Feldman cornered. Others remained cautious, wary of relying on old memories. But with these developments, the prosecution's case was complete, a picture fully painted. As the day ended, Feldman sat silent, hands trembling, sweat beading on his forehead. Gone was his early defiance. He was a small figure under the weight of evidence. The Harper family held hands, eyes on the judge. They knew justice after nearly 2 decades was closer than ever. On verdict day, the Philadelphia courtroom was packed, tension thick as the city held its breath. The jury returned after 4 days of deliberation. Silence fell as the foreman stood, paper trembling but voice firm. We find the defendant, Mark Feldman, guilty of kidnapping and first-degree murder of Emily Harper. The judge's gavel struck, echoing like a final cut through nearly 2 decades of pain. Feldman bowed his head, lips tight, as Emily's mother, Karen Harper, sobbed in her family's arms. The judge sentenced immediately, life without parole. You will spend the rest of your days behind bars, unable to harm again. The ruling rang out, echoing years of injustice. The courtroom buzzed, some clapped, others sat silent. But all understood. Justice had spoken. Headlines screamed, Mark Feldman sentenced to life. Justice for Emily Harper, after 19 years. TV screens showed Feldman escorted out, his aged, faded face still bearing the shadow of the man who'd slipped through for so long. What stunned the public most was a detail revealed post-trial. In 2002, days after Emily vanished, Feldman joined volunteers distributing posters and searching along the Delaware River. Old local newspaper photos resurfaced, showing him in the crowd, holding a missing Emily Harper flyer. The hypocrisy chilled the community, a killer standing beside the victim's family, pretending to search for the girl he'd buried. Philadelphia was shaken. Online forums buzzed with confessions from people who'd seen Feldman at Emily's prayer vigils, never suspecting him. One resident wrote, "It's horrifying to know the man we lit candles with was her killer." For the Harper family, the verdict was relief, but couldn't erase the loss. Karen said, at a post-trial press conference, "We lost Emily forever, but at least now she's named, and the man who destroyed her life has paid." Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone, as if a 19-year burden had lifted. In legal circles, The Emily Harper case became a landmark study in combining forensic genealogy with persistent cold case investigation. Police and law schools included it in curricula, emphasizing three factors: meticulous evidence preservation, genealogy's breakthrough role, and the power of online communities keeping cases alive. Analyses noted, without the hair preserved properly, in 2002, without 2019 genealogy, without web sleuths and Reddit's 2012 push, Feldman might have lived out his days undetected. The case proved justice can be delayed, but not lost. In Philadelphia, Emily's annual candlelight vigil became a broader memorial, not just for her, but for all cold case victims. A new plaque was added to the South Street Memorial Wall, Justice for Emily, and for all still waiting. Detective Ryan Keller, who'd kept Emily's file on his desk for years, wrote in his final report, "The Harper case is closed, no longer a cold case. It's a reminder that patience and science, combined, can bring justice across time." He left the records room one late afternoon, golden sunlight streaming through the window, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, he allowed himself a sigh of peace. The Emily Harper case ended, but its ripples spread. It became a cautionary tale for Philadelphia and America. Darkness can hide in plain sight. Sometimes killers blend into crowds with feigned goodwill. Above all, it proved no secret stays buried forever. The truth will find its way to light. The Emily Harper case in Philadelphia, 2002, is not just a nearly two-decade journey to justice, but a reflection of ongoing issues in American life. When Emily vanished after her South Street shift, the case initially stalled, like thousands of missing persons cases nationwide. But through preserved evidence, advancements in DNA genealogy, and pressure from online communities like web sleuths and Reddit, the truth emerged. It's a reminder that every detail, a hair sample, an old map marked South Street Girl, a witness's memory of a blue pickup, can unlock justice. In today's America, where families still wait for answers in missing persons cases, the lesson is clear: never dismiss seemingly trivial details, and never let cold cases be forgotten. Modern forensic technology, from CODIS to private genealogy, proves justice can be revived with persistence, but this story also underscores the community's role. The 2012 online pressure forced police to revisit the case, keeping it alive in collective memory. The advice for all is to stay vigilant, observant, and ready to share even the smallest information. It could help a family find closure. For law enforcement, the Emily Harper case emphasizes that persistence, transparency, and integrating new technology with duty are the only path to making justice real, even after decades of waiting. Thank you for following the Emily Harper case to its end. Proof that justice may come late, but never vanishes. Subscribe to the channel for more gripping investigation journeys. See you in the next video.